Aschau, a small town on Lake Chiemsee in 1910. A 14-year-old boy dreams of flying. He calls himself an aviatician. He'll become Germany's most famous pilot, and 31 years from now will put a bullet through his head. The Nazis carried him to his grave with due ceremony, marching in step beneath the swastika. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarshal and head of the Air Ministry, called it a tragic accident. The official line was that Udet had crashed on a test flight. The cult of death and crocodile tears.
Jetzt müssen wir Abschied nehmen. Unfassbar ist uns der Gedanke, dass du, mein lieber Udet, nicht mehr unter uns weilst.
That was a lie. Göring himself had driven the flyer to his death. Udet cuts out his dream from paper, a dream of flying. Flying is a passion, he said. Once you know how, you'll never let go of it. He described himself as a happy child, but he was over 30 when this was filmed. His paper dream would later turn into a nightmare of steel and destruction. He invented the Stuka, meaning dive bomber. Howling infernally, the aeroplane carried death to its target with pinpoint precision. It was one of the first terror weapons of World War II.
Udet hat mir einmal, ich glaube, das hat er öfter auch an andere Kameraden geschrieben, einmal geschrieben, das Fliehen ist das Leben wert.
Worth risking your life for, as well as the death of so many people. The contents of this cigar box express the contradictions of Udet's life. Here are letters, pocket diaries, calendars, and photographs, the pieces of a puzzle. Together, they describe an entire life. From the First World War, letters to his parents, jubilantly reporting the 62 planes he shot down, and receiving the highest German medal, pour le mérite. Udet, the happy child at the age of 3. He grew up in Munich, a carefree childhood, as the only son of parents from the high bourgeoisie. By the Isar River, his interest in flying machines was kindled by looking through the fence of the Otto aeroplane factory. He saw man-made birds being created from wood and canvas. The dream of flying, also a dream of freedom, a dream which could fail. August 1914. The war began with enthusiasm. Everyone wanted to be there, including the 18-year-old Udet, who volunteered. But the examining doctors put an end to Udet's enthusiasm. He was healthy, but at 160 centimeters, he was too short for the front. Unfit for combat. Rejected. But Udet had a special ticket to the front, a motorcycle, a gift from his wealthy father. The German Automobile Club was looking for volunteer dispatch riders for the German troops. Udet was longing for the trenches. The reality of the war was brutal and bloody. But in its first year, it was still being cast in a patriotic light. The war was an adventure for would-be heroes. The letters Udet sent to his parents were full of the boastful talk common at the time. Strasbourg, August the 20th, 1914. Hopefully we'll soon get back to the front, he wrote. Then we'll give those guys such a thrashing they won't fit into a coffin. Schoolboy bravado, a way of talking yourself out of your fears. Better still, you fly away from them. Udet's knowledge of engines and planes brought him a dream job, fighter pilot. Flyers were the new idols, the knights of the air. They flew in rickety constructions of canvas and plywood. The air war looked like a game, but it was a deadly battle. Hardly any of the famous fighter pilots survived the war. You cannot think, wrote Udet, that everyone you shoot down has a mother who cries for him. He successfully ignored that as a member of Baron von Richthofen's famous squadron. The Red Baron, the role model. Another pilot, Hermann Göring, was to influence Udet's life profoundly. Cold-blooded, ambitious, a man who liked power. He later headed the Luftwaffe under the Nazis. But Ernst Udet was a jovial daredevil, attractive to women. At the end of the war, there was a revolt in Germany, producing the Weimar Republic. The Allies confiscated everything that could fly. For the time being, the dream was over. Udet established himself in true bourgeois style in Munich. Near his spacious flat lived another ex-soldier. The former Lance Corporal Adolf Hitler. He had just become the leader of a small party. As yet, the two hadn't met. Udet had only one passion: flying. Funded by a rich American, he started the Udet Aeroplane Company and called himself a manufacturer from then on. The first prototypes were built secretly in a chicken coop factory as the Versailles Treaty prohibited the manufacture of aeroplanes. Later, a great deal of money would come from the army, secret rearmament in an unquiet peace. And Udet was flying once more. For him, this was what mattered most. Before huge audiences in both Germany and America, he risked his life performing dangerous stunts. Battle maneuvers had become circus acrobatics. No one else dared perform loops so close to the ground. No one else could pick up a cloth with a wingtip. One of the most breathtaking stunts, no one else could do it. With the engine of his Flamingo off and the propeller motionless, Udet flies one more loop. Then he slowly approaches the runway, the engine still off. The Flamingo drifts down towards the runway, approaching the touchdown sideways. It seems impossible to stay airborne, but like a true acrobat, the danger is always under control.
Ich hatte das Gefühl, dass einfach wie ein Vogel ist. War so sicher, dass man überhaupt keine Angst mehr mit ihm zu fliegen hatte, gar keine Angst. War wie ein Vogel.
Sehen Sie, Frau, mit der Fliegerei ist das so eine Sache. Viele fühlen sich berufen, aber nur ganz wenige sind auserwählt.
Flying as genius, the pilot as artist. Crazy daring, Udet flies under the bridges of the Isar. Udet over Munich's Central Railway Station. Playing a pilot for a film in the skies above Serengeti. Or between the walls of a Greenland glacier for the film SOS Iceberg, in which his friend Leni Riefenstahl also acted.
War ein Draufgänger. War immer auf der Peripherie, immer gleich vor einem Absturz. Aber hatte eben ein so feines fliegerisches Gefühl, dass bis an die äußersten Grenzen gehen konnte. Und war ein fanatischer Kunstflieger. Das war sein Leben. Und war ein Angeber.
Udet, roaring engines in the roaring 20s. Everyone in Berlin knew him. There was always a table reserved for him at his favorite restaurant. Wild parties and Udet always in the thick of it.
Das war ja auch ein Mensch, der immer gute Laune um sich verbreitete, nicht, wo der war. Ich frage mich manchmal, wie kann ein Mensch eigentlich nur gute Laune verbreiten? Wie sieht es eigentlich in ihm aus? Wo ist denn die Kehrseite der Medaille?
Udet was hardly ever alone and was seen at the most popular bars. He was a lady killer, the life of the party, dancing on tabletops. He put on juggling performances. The cognac and champagne flowed. He juggled plates and glasses when he was in really high spirits. Or he'd put a safety pin through his lip. He called it his fakir trick.
Ich habe die Frauen immer, ich habe sie nicht verstanden, die sich so an ihn gekettet haben, nicht wahr? Weil für mein Gefühl gab er als Mann zu wenig und nahm zu viel.
Udet! Udet! Udet!
Die Frauen haben sicher immer mehr erwartet, als er von den Frauen erwartet hat. Er hat das genossen und mitgenommen, was er da bekommen konnte.
Und was gefällt Ihnen am besten hier? Nicht die Frauen?
Nein, wirklich nicht.
Ich glaube, er wäre sehr bestürzt gewesen, wenn er hätte nachfühlen können, was er meiner Mutter und wahrscheinlich auch noch anderen Frauen angetan hat.
Udet with Amy Bessel, a young actress. It was love at first sight. In 1933, she gave birth to his daughter. Udet sent a telegram while enjoying himself with friends at Lake Eibsee. Congratulations, call her Anna-Marie. Please write Eibsee Hotel, Udlinger. By this time, he was in a new relationship with another woman. And he had another relationship with politics as well. The Federal Archives in Berlin. These files contain a document which sheds light on Udet's attitudes at that time, proof of his membership of the National Socialists. He joined as soon as the party came to power. Occupation flyer, says his membership card. Joined May 1st, 1933. His fall from grace. What made the non-political flyer and playboy join the Nazis? A temptation he could not resist. When Hitler wormed his way into power, Udet traveled to America. There he made a pact with the devil, but he didn't know it yet. The American newspapers wrote that Udet, the famous flying ace, was most impressed with Hitler. The reason for these lies, the Curtiss Hawk, an aeroplane with a hugely powerful engine which could perform the most daring stunts. Goering would buy 2 Curtiss Hawks for Udet, provided he joined the party.
Das war eben die Gemeinheit von Göring. Und hat auch nicht richtig mitmachen wollen im Anfang. Er hat gesagt, das will ich. Und hat Göring gedacht, ja, dann kaufe ich ihm ein paar Maschinen in Amerika und dann soll er hinfliehen oder hinfahren und sich die Maschinen da holen. So hat er ihn gekauft.
Er hat seine 2 Curtiss-Wright-Maschinen gehabt, aber wie ein Kind mit Spielzeugen, nicht?
The child and his new toy. The aeroplane embodied all of Udet's longings. Vertical climb, vertical dive. The flying engine, they called it. A 700 horsepower miracle of aluminium for which Udet had sold his soul. The daring takeoffs and nosedives gave Udet a fateful idea. This fighter plane became the model for the Stuka, the dive bomber, Hitler's first weapon of terror. This plane was found in a field near Krakow. It is the Curtiss Hawk, the plane of Udet's dreams. It became the model for one of the most horrific weapons used in World War II. In this bucket seat, Udet completed many of his hazardous stunts. Using these levers, he earned worldwide acclaim. But with this joystick, he practiced a maneuver that would terrify thousands of victims. Udet's stunt show became deadly serious. Even now, 60 years after the last takeoff, the pistons fire. The voice of temptation, which was to be Udet's downfall. After January 1933, Hitler was Reich Chancellor and called the tune. In the streets, people sensed what was to come. Couldn't Udet see what was wrong, or didn't he want to see it? To be a great flyer, you have to make a pact with the devil, he said, but don't let him swallow you up. A visit to Udet's home. Just an overgrown boy, sports trophies and memorabilia. Kitsch from the World War and trophies for the planes he had shot down. Portrait of the Red Baron. Udet as a dashing young man wearing his Pour le Mérite medal. Much vanity, but also a great deal of loneliness. All questions are locked out, repressed. Udet began to drink more and more heavily, wine, beer, cognac. He ordered a mobile bar from a carpenter, which became standard equipment on all his flights. Glasses were carefully stowed to survive any stunt. Udet always drank when he flew. His generation considered heavy drinking manly. We liked each other and drank our first bottle of brandy together, recalled his friend, the writer Karl Zuckmayer, who later wrote a play, The Devil's General, based on Udet's life.
War natürlich ein leidenschaftlicher Trinker, trank sehr viel. Und bevor geflogen ist, wenn Sie gehört haben, hat immer einen ganzen schönen Schuss Cognac getrunken.
Aber ich glaube, dass bei Udet zunehmend auch der Alkohol Ängste betäuben sollte. Und zwar die Ängste, mit der Position, die hatte, nicht fertig zu werden.
Fear caused by his old comrade-in-arms, Göring, who was organizing the new Air Force, just as Hitler wanted it.
Deutscher Fleiß, deutsche Arbeit, deutsche Erfindung und deutsche Organisation haben hier nun der Welt einen neuen Beweis ihrer einzigartigen Kraft und Stärke gegeben.
Now Göring needed a role model for his Air Force. Udet was expected to take on the task, and he did.
Aber wenn es auch mal schief geht, Jugend muss wagen.
Youth must be daring. Udet was just the man for such propaganda slogans, and for the weekly newsreels, which showed him at the side of the Reich's master of the hunt. Udet played along, but had conflicting feelings. In the German forest, there's a smell of carcasses, he wrote in his notebook. The Reich Air Ministry, a bureaucracy which Göring made gigantic. Udet could call himself Chief of the Technical Office and later Chief Air Inspector General. These fantasy titles were flattering, but also required a great deal of desk work. The ministry became his prison. The ministry grew like a tumor, 3,000 employees. Göring wanted to turn the Air Force into the backbone of the armed forces. Udet had a talent for drawing and did this cartoon of himself. Chained to his desk, he naively dreams of better times. Frustration or flirtation? He drew himself as the victim, But he had become the perpetrator. He dreamt of the times when he had roamed the skies in his flamingo plane. He was a fantasist who fled his problems. He repressed them, but by now his pact with the devil was sealed. But could he admit it? At San Remo, he put on a show of loyalty for the cameras of the weekly newsreel, strolling with Goering in civilian clothes like a tourist. He hid behind jovial wisecracking.
Vor allem hat über Göring gelacht, weil Göring so cäsarenhaft mit seiner weißen Uniform, mit seinem goldenen Gürtel und seinem Marschallstab da rumlief, mit seinem dicken Bauch. Da hat er irgendwie komische Bemerkungen über ihn gemacht. Ja.
But what use were jokes and civilian clothes now that he was so deeply implicated? In this period, Udet approved a rearmament plan that prepared for war. In just under 2 years, the number of Air Force planes would increase from 3,400 to almost 24,000, a six-fold increase. Rechlin, 100 kilometers north of Berlin. The Air Force, as a fantasy of power, would now be put to the test. The rusty ruins of Goering's pride. These hangars once housed top-secret armaments projects, prototypes for the so-called miracle weapons, such as the jet bomber. On these rails, the Führer's train pulled in at Rechlin on July the 3rd, 1939, the decisive inspection tour. Hitler wanted to see the Air Force's rearmament for himself. He wanted confirmation of what he already believed, that nothing and no one could defeat this Air Force, that the war could begin. Udet next to Hitler, eager to please. Udet and Goering, the experienced fighter pilots of World War I, wanted to show the Lance Corporal what aeroplanes were capable of. Hitler was impressed. German craftsmanship for his World War madness. It was essentially a repetition of the air shows of the 1920s. Udet demonstrated his skills, and the public was amazed. The strangest prototypes, impressive aerial stunts, show flights.
Der Göring wollte sagen, hier, das ist meine Luftwaffe. Ne?
Hat Hitler Dinge vorgeführt und hat ihm also wirkliche Sachen vorgeführt, von denen Hitler überzeugt war. Wir sind die einmaligen Könner und Konstrukteure. Im Grunde genommen waren das meistens ihre Prototypen.
Wir waren in gewisser Weise voraus, zum Beispiel mit der ganzen Strahlfliegerei, Jets, Raketen und so weiter. Zweifellos. Aber das konnte niemals die industrielle, rein massenmäßige Überlegenheit ausgleichen.
But Hitler was convinced his Air Force was invincible. No one mentioned the shortage of raw materials. Goering provided the fantasies, and Udet put them on show. The war could begin.
Seit 5:45 Uhr wird jetzt zurückgeschossen.
The 1st of September 1939, attack on Poland. Udet's weapon, the Junkers 87, the Stuka, was about to attack. The Polish army had nothing to counter it. The Jericho trumpet, a siren fixed to the plane, howled over Poland. Udet's invention terrified its victims. But dive bombing was dangerous for the pilots too, leaving nightmarish memories.
Das ist eine wahnsinnige Überwindung, überhaupt ein Flugzeug nach unten zu stürzen. Er hat die Leute überschätzt einfach, hat von sich auf andere geschlossen. Anders kann ich mir das auch nicht vorstellen. Das war ein grandioser Fehler von ihm. Die Amerikaner und Engländer, die flohen die gleichen Geschichte mit großem Erfolg waagerecht und trafen auch ins Ziel.
Warsaw in ruins. This Secret Service film, shot immediately after the bombing, was made to show the effects of attacks from the air. Was Udet unaware of the misery caused by his weapon? After this victory, Hitler thought anything was possible and signed autographs like a movie star. Nerves were strained at the Air Ministry. For Hitler, the war had just begun, but the Air Force and its leaders were already running out of steam. While Goering let things slide, Udet buckled under his workload. The huge Air Ministry was disorganized. Udet hoped the latest prototypes would impress, but by now raw materials were running out. And a competitor who was trying to dislodge him, Goering's State Secretary Erhard Milch, who said, Hitler rightly considers Udet the greatest aviator, but that doesn't make him a great engineer.
Man hatte den Eindruck, dass der Milch dem Udet Neid entgegengebracht hat, weil er als Generalluftzeugmeister zweifellos also eine gewisse führende Stellung hatte, die er gern eingenommen hätte.
Milch war der große Organisator, der große Könner, und er war schon dazu prädestiniert, weil er doch Direktor von der Lufthansa war, sodass er also auch kaufmännisch und organisatorisch Udet weit überlegen war.
Perhaps it'll work out after all. Udet at a New Year reception at the Soviet embassy in 1940, after the Nazi-Soviet pact. Udet appeared relaxed among his packed comrades. Here was a breathing space. Perhaps there'd be no war with Russia. Perhaps no one would notice that many planes couldn't be built, that there was a lack of raw materials, especially aluminium. Perhaps he would have another lucky escape. He retreated into drink.
Die Tragik war eben der Krieg für ihn. Das möchte ich mit 3 Worten sagen, nur der Krieg.
And it went on. The 10th of May, 1940. The attack in the west. Stukas over Belgium. The Air Force advanced in step with the ground forces as far as Dunkirk. The French planes were destroyed on the ground. Udet's Stukas celebrated their last great victory. At such short range, the Stuka was a weapon that terrorized the enemy. But Udet knew he couldn't go on winning battles forever.
Das Leben, das er geführt hat, als der Krieg ausbrach, das war ja das Gegenteil von dem Leben, was er vorher geführt hat. Und das muss ihn sehr verändert haben.
Udet now issued daily orders which begged his employees to achieve the final victory for their dearly beloved fatherland, Nazi jargon. Did he realize what he was saying? There was to be no final victory. The war continued. Bomb England was Hitler's order, as the way to the Channel was now open. Goering with German troops. He promised his pilots would soften up the island for invasion. The Battle of Britain had begun. Udet knew the German Air Force could not win. The range was too great for the Stukas, and the slow German bombers would be an easy target for the Royal Air Force. The bombs falling on England only strengthened the British determination to resist. London burning. Such images disguised the true balance of power. The demise of the German Air Force had long since begun.
Wir, die wir damals flogen, haben an die Möglichkeit, diese Schlacht zu gewinnen, nicht geglaubt. Und wenn Sie sich dann also die Verlustziffern ansahen, dann blieben Hunderte von Flugzeugen blieben also drüben und dann ich auch, dann konnte man sich an 3 Fingern abzählen, dass daraus nichts werden konnte.
Udet knew. By now he was taking ever higher doses of amphetamines. Just one tablet could keep you awake for days, but Udet was taking them by the packet. and cognac, lurching between euphoria and depression. His dream of flying in a pill, a flight from the evil reality which surrounded him into a weightlessness which anesthetized all reality.
Nimmt das Pervitin, weil nicht zu dieser Dauerleistung von so einer psychischen Struktur her fähig ist, sondern immer sofortige Erfolgserlebnisse braucht. Ich denke, das kann man haben, wenn man fliegt, wenn man Ziele erreicht, wenn man Abenteuer erlebt, aber man kann natürlich nicht irgendeine leitende Funktion in einem Verwaltungsapparat mit so einer Persönlichkeitsstruktur durchstehen, und deshalb nimmt man dann, vermute ich, immer dann dieses schon bekannte Mittel, wenn man das Gefühl hat, ich halte es jetzt nicht mehr aus, ich stehe das nicht mehr durch, ich muss jetzt irgendwas für mich tun, um das noch zu bewältigen.
Udet began to draw again, with a wicked sense of self-deprecation. Self-portraits, he's ill. On his chest sits an evil nightmare, the gigantic armament program which he will never complete. Udet was now considered a security risk. Göring sent him to the Black Forest on holiday with 2 doctors at his side. His competitor, Milch, was to take over temporarily, or so they said. On an excursion up Feldberg Mountain, Udet signed his name in the guest book, like a good tourist. Below the names of his keepers, he wrote in his best handwriting reserved for autographs, Ernst Udet. In the column headed guest status, he wrote with bitter sarcasm, mentally and physically broken. And the war went on, now in the east against Russia, June 1941. Udet knew that this war on all fronts had long since been lost, that his aircraft must be lost on the vast plains of Russia, like the ground troops. The Air Force had been equipped for short-range targets and couldn't attack this huge country. The advance became bogged down. The Air Force could hardly support the infantry because of the enormous distances, despite the propaganda images. Göring's boastful dream of an all-conquering Air Force came to an end during this advance. But the misery caused by the German army in Russia was indescribable. Could Udet repress this fact?
Eins erinnere ich mich, dass sehr verzweifelt war und aufgeregt war, als Russland der Krieg erklärt wurde, als die Deutschen in Russland einmarschiert sind. Ich glaube, da hat ich erinnere mich, er hat gesagt, Leni, das geht nicht gut. Ja, das hat er gesagt, Leni, das geht nicht gut.
Er hat immer nur gesagt, es geht schief. Es muss schief gehen.
August 1941, Göring's train in the Ukraine. Here, the Reichsmarshal held court, far removed from the cruel reality of the war. Situation briefing. Udet now stood to one side. He was indifferent, apathetic. The last footage of Udet. 3 months later, he shot himself.
Hat mir nur mal gesagt, wochenlang vorher, ich habe die Schnauze voll. Das hat er gesagt, ich habe die Schnauze voll, der Krieg ist sowieso verloren. Dem Wahnsitz hat er auch gesagt, was doktert ihr so lange an verspäteten Flugzeugen rum? Es ist ja sowieso schon zu spät.
Er hat wirklich darunter gelitten, einem Dritten Reich zu dienen in einer exponierten Stelle.
The ministry ordered portraits of Udet a few weeks before his death. Once more, he tried to manage the old poses. No longer the beaming hero. The smiles for the camera weren't a success. There has been much speculation and legend over what happened next. His final 24 hours reconstructed. November the 16th was a gorgeous day, a Sunday. A few people met in the Heerstrasse in Berlin. Udet, his former flight technician, Bayer, and Udet's lover, Inge Bleile. He made awful jokes and tried to bury his dog Bobby in heaps of fallen leaves, she later testified. Somehow he was very wound up and cheerful in a worrying way. They decided to go to Udet's flat in Stallupöner Allee. "1 p.m. They sat down at his mobile bar. Have as many cigars as you like," Udet told Bayer. "They're the last I'll be able to give you." They smoked, drank. Udet drank a whole bottle of brandy over the next few hours. They talked about old times. The wall next to the bar was covered in memorabilia, pictures of aircraft, friends, and lovers. "Somehow I was scared," Inge Bleile said later. "Udet was so restless and he drank so much." His cheerfulness was a front. He tried to laugh off his fears. Early afternoon. Bayer had left. Udet and Inge sat on the sofa and kept drinking. He was still talking non-stop about his life, nothing held back. How in von Richthofen's squadron he'd won victory after victory as a knight of the air. "In those days we were still decent," he kept saying. And how all the flying enthusiasts had met on the Wasserkuppe mountain, so at ease, so carefree, so different. SOS Iceberg, those crazy days of filming in Greenland with Leni Riefenstahl. A child's dream of flying. He had filmed lions and giraffes. His film was called Strange Birds Over Africa. Then the times had changed. He'd let himself be bought by Goering, the wrong man in the wrong place. Crazy armaments plans he couldn't fulfill, nightmares over the crimes being committed. Early evening. Inge Bleile tried to distract a depressed Udet. They visited some friends, the Winters. Udet played with their children. He was like a child himself. "Tomorrow, Uncle Ernst will no longer be alive," he said, and the children laughed. Dreams of flying. They sat down to dinner at 7:30. There was duck with red cabbage. "I feel like that duck," Udet said. "Here today, gone tomorrow." Red chrysanthemums on the table, red candles, solemn like a funeral. Udet was cheerful and kept telling jokes, as he had in Berlin in the 20s. But who could believe his laughter? Udet drank. "Let me drink," he said. "This is my last brandy." Another brandy. With it, apple strudel and black coffee, lots of it, and cigars. It was a feast, the condemned man's last meal. "Someone who keeps talking about it won't do it," Mrs. Winter whispered to Inge Bleile. Suddenly, all of them felt silent. Not a word about politics, not a single word. They left the Winters about 1 a.m. Udet drove Inge to her flat. She did not want to be with him now. She was afraid she couldn't bear his depression. Udet was in a crazy mood again and sang the latest songs. "We should have got married, had children, instead of fighting this shitty war," he said suddenly. Too late. Everything was sliding towards the abyss. At about 8:30 a.m., Inge Bleiler's phone rang. It was Udet. His voice was quite calm and cold, she later recalled in her statement. "There's no point anymore," he said. She heard the shot over the phone. Ernst Udet had shot himself at his desk with a Colt revolver. The escape into alcohol and drugs had not been enough. Death as the ultimate denial of failure, of crime, and of his weakness in the face of it all. But one mystery still remains. At the end, Udet had given vent to his depression. He scribbled an accusation in lipstick on the headboard of his bed. Immediately after it was discovered, his adjutants wiped off this farewell. What had Udet written? A 40-year-old document provides conclusive evidence. It's Inge Bleiler's account of the night he died. Udet had written 3 sentences. "Darling Inge, why did you leave me? Man of iron, you lied to me," meaning Göring, and Milch, you bastard. Inge Bleiler's eyewitness account. In Berlin's Invalid Cemetery, a place once divided by the no man's land between East and West, Ernst Udet lies buried. Göring lied when he said that Udet had died like a hero. Even his death certificate stated that the flyer had not died in the cockpit. "To be a great flyer, you have to make a pact with the devil," Ernst Udet had said. "But don't let him swallow you up." But he had let himself be swallowed up.